I don't know who first mentioned to me the principle that the best lies, the most effective lies, are the ones that parallel the truth. But man, oh man, has that one stuck with me. Because danged if that isn't right. The lies that are just outrageous and ridiculous and insane, until very recently at least, those kind of lies you could just dismiss. Now, it's true. We are entering into a new phase of lying where through Orwellian brute force, you can just say something again and again and again. You can look people in the face and say that one thing is the exact opposite of the thing that it actually is. And maybe if you get 51% of people to believe it, it somehow becomes truth. But we're in the middle of something of an epistemological crisis about truth and lies. So just don't think about right now as a good example of the effectiveness of a good truth and the effectiveness of a good lie. Think about like all of human history pretty much until right now, and this will probably make more sense. For most of time, and in most situations, the best lies are the ones that parallel the truth. They don't directly contradict it. They aren't easily researched or exposed. They're the kind of lies that are shady, slippery, the kind of lies that play into what you already wanted to think. Now, think about what you're into politically, socially. It's ridiculous that we've all been crammed into these stupid camps. The sooner we get past that, the better life will be. But for now, picture your camp, right? The team that you have, that your fortunes are kind of hitched to. And then just picture the kind of things you see on social media or the news that make you feel good. Whether they're true or they're lies, they always reinforce the patterns you already see, and they make you feel good. Now think about the things that you see that make you feel bad. They don't reinforce it. How could anybody see it that way? That's crazy. They run opposite to the patterns that you observe or that you're being coached to observe, that I'm being coached to observe. And if you can picture those raw emotions, then you can picture why this principle of the best lies are the ones that run closest to the truth. You can picture why that works so well. If it seems like something that already fits with a pattern that you've already observed, it's much easier to go along with that. And then we get into another part of human psychology, which is the part where we say, all right, I've already bought into this. I've made an emotional decision to agree with this truth claim. And I've already painted myself into a corner. Maybe I've verbally shed blood over it. I've said harsh things. I've parted ways with people in my life because I decided that thing I got told was true. And now it's going to take a mountain of evidence. Some people have argued an order of magnitude more evidence to get me to change my mind. And even if that mountain of evidence is presented, I still might not change my mind because I'm a normal human being, unless there's some social escape route where I get to keep some modicum of dignity and where some circumstances change to allow me to admit that maybe the thing that I bought into and proliferated was in fact a lie. Lies are just super, super sticky, especially the well-crafted ones. And I got to give props to the religious leaders and the quote-unquote witnesses that they produced in Matthew 26 at Jesus' initial trial at the house of Caiaphas in the middle of the night or very, very early morning when nobody was around to look at it, because these witnesses came up with a lie that runs right parallel to the truth. It almost could be real, and if it were, that would be horribly offensive to the people who don't like Jesus. They would hear what these two witnesses said and be like, that sounds right. That's believable. I've heard other people I also don't like say things that were similar to that. And isn't that just how things are these days? My goodness gracious, that's the problem right there. And boom, you bought the lie. You took the bait. You're in. And it's going to sound real good to the religious leadership as a rationale, a justification that they could trot out, that they could use to get people worked up to say, no, Jesus was bad. We found out under the cover of darkness, and now we totally know, and we're here to faithfully report it to you. It's a lie that runs parallel to the truth. Let me read you what I'm talking about. Matthew 26:57. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of the law and the elders had assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance right up to the courtyard of the high priest. He entered and sat down with guards to see the outcome. Now, we got a pin in that one. We're coming back to Peter in a minute, but remember, this is like one of those Act 3 big climactic moments in an epic Star Wars movie where you got multiple high drama, high stakes plot things that relate to each other all unfolding at once. So right now we're dialed in on what's happening with Caiaphas and this initial trial. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for false evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. As we talked about yesterday, we've been seeing that throughout the book of Matthew. They've been looking for all kinds of opportunities. I think we looked at 6, 7 different places where they tried it and they lost at every turn, which is why now they're having to dig even deeper, scrape the bottom of the barrel, and the text affirms this, Matthew 26:60, but they did not find any, though many false witnesses came forward. Finally, 2 came forward and declared, and before we get to what they declared, I think those other witnesses who came forward, their stories just wouldn't have passed muster with the crowds. We know the Pharisees and Sadducees were very finger on the pulse of the crowds. They knew they didn't fully have them in their corner. So this is going to have to be a good lie that ran very close to the truth in order for it to work. So these 2 witnesses come forward and they have a lie that seems more appealing. They said, "This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days." And then the high priest gets up and is like, "Is that true?" and yells at Jesus a bunch, and we're going to look at that more. But first, let's consider the merits of this accusation. Did Jesus ever say that? Okay, well, let me just mentally run back through Matthew here. You know what? I'm going to have you just go back and reread all of it up to this point and see if he ever said that. Maybe just pause it and then come back. Okay, just give me a second here. Okay, welcome back. Did he say that? Okay, no, I didn't see it either anywhere in Matthew, but you could make a case that maybe he kind of said that over at the beginning of John, in John 2 something to something. Looks like it starts in verse 18. It says, "Then the Jews demanded of him, 'What miraculous sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all this?'" And what an interesting distillation we're getting from John there of all kinds of those traps that we read about yesterday. I mean, by what authority do you do this? You know, my favorite exchange between Jesus and the religious leaders, the one where Jesus bounces it back to them and they refuse to answer his question. And Jesus is like, "Well, then I refuse to answer yours." We get overtones of that there. We get the demand for a miraculous sign. And what is that? Matthew 12 with the sign of Jonah business. And I think maybe even twice in Matthew 12 on either side of the "you're in league with Beelzebub" nonsense that they throw out. I mean, they're just flinging stuff at the wall, seeing what'll stick here. So they ask this question, and Jesus answers in verse 19, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." All right, that's the closest thing to the lie that we have Jesus on record as saying at all. But it's not the lie. And in a way, it's kind of like how Satan's words in Matthew 4 and Luke 4 in the temptation sound really close to Bible, but they're not quite the Bible. They're intentional slight misquotes or alterations. It's like how some Christian adjacent groups have certain Bible verses in the Gospels that look like what the Bible actually says or how it's recorded in the original language and how we've had it since forever, but there's just a couple different words in there, here and there, that just make it slightly different. It just runs parallel to the truth. So they said that Jesus said he was going to destroy the temple and then raise it in 3 days. John records it as being, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." So the parallel to the truth part is that the temple is getting destroyed and it's going to be raised again in 3 days. The part that is separated from the truth is who does the destroying. Jesus is saying, "You destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." That's very different than "I'm going to destroy the temple," which would have made people real mad. From Matthew 16 on, it seems like almost every chapter, like certainly on average once per chapter, Jesus is pounding this point. This is going to happen. It has to happen. This is in fulfillment of the stuff from Isaiah and Zechariah and everything that we've looked at. And so John just positions this a little bit earlier. Now, surely much like anybody who goes on a 3-year campaign without social media or electronic communication, and even without using printed material to circulate his ideas, there's going to be a ton of repetition. My assumption would be that Jesus said things like this a lot and had a lot more confrontations like this than are actually recorded here. So John gives us one, Matthew gives us one, but all of that comes back to this lie that runs parallel to the truth. These dudes said that Jesus threatened to destroy the temple and then cryptically to put it back together in 3 days, but he didn't say that. Now, maybe Judas, who was ratting Jesus out and betraying him, maybe he ran with something that Jesus said back in, where is it? Beginning of 24? Yes, after Jesus rebukes all of the Pharisees and religious leaders in Matthew 23. Remember, it's pretty awkward. They leave the temple and they're walking away when one of the disciples comes up to him to call his attention to the buildings on the Temple Mount. And Jesus said, "Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down." Maybe Judas, running a lie that runs parallel to the truth, grabbed onto that and was like, close enough. And he went and told it to some people, and he was prepared to go on record and vouch that, no, Jesus definitely said something about destroying the temple. But in all of these situations, Jesus is acknowledging that there will be a destruction of the physical temple. He seems to be at least strongly alluding to it here and in the Olivet Discourse in general. And also, Jesus is strongly alluding to the destruction of himself as the temple, the place of mediation between God and man. And he's clearly, the 3 days to rebuild it is an allusion to the resurrection and Jesus' defeat of death. So I'm prepared to issue a final verdict. These guys said something that is vaguely close to the truth, that runs parallel to the truth. It's the kind of thing that leaves them plausible deniability. So if they got confronted on it, they could be like, well, it was pretty much what we said. I mean, it was, it was close. Like, I might have misheard a little bit, but you should have seen the way he said it. Like, that's pretty much what he said. That's definitely kind of pretty much what he said. I can't be held accountable for it. I did my best to repeat it. It seems like they're going to have a lot of room to equivocate here is the point. But on closer examination, we have no record of Jesus actually having said the thing that he is accused of saying, even though he said things that use similar words and deal in vaguely similar concepts to what these two accusers are claiming he said. The best lies, the most effective lies, run parallel to the truth. And a good old-fashioned effective lie is going to take at least an order of magnitude more energy to sort through and correct than it takes to create in the first place. Thank you for talking about lies with me today. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.